So, welcome to everyone. I'm so glad to see everyone. This morning, I see some friendly faces of people I know and some friendly faces of people that I would like to get to know. I'm so happy that we have this opportunity on a cold Sunday morning to spend some time together. Today is NaTaN's second of our meetings addressing how to best cope with COVID-19. The first one was a tutorial on Zoom given by our own Leah Solidokin. The information from that meeting is available if you would like to have it. For a little background, I would like to briefly tell you or remind you about NaTaN. NaTaN is Young Israel's Neighbor to Neighbor initiative, which was launched in February of this year, right before COVID hit. How fortunate were we that we had a program already installed, which was devoted to reaching out to one another in tangible ways when we might need it the most. So when COVID hit and people needed shopping, medicines, phone calls, or just a way to stay connected, we were there with a cadre of volunteers and recipients. So right now, each and every one of us is in need. It's been a long 9 months since we gathered as a whole community in person to socialize. Davening for the past months has been going on, but many people don't feel comfortable in attending. So that's diminished as well. We just finished Hanukkah, where we focused on lights. And last week, we got a semblance of light with the approval of our first vaccine. And today, we gather together in search of the light of Jewish wisdom to give us insights and practical ideas for self-care in the midst of this pandemic. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guide today. Marjorie Sokoll, M.Ed, is the founder and director of the Betty Ann Greenberg Miller Center for Jewish Healing at Jewish Family and Children's Services. The center helps people feel a sense of connection when facing the challenges of illness, loss, caregiving, or isolation by offering spiritual and communal supports to foster hope, comfort, and wholeness, guided by Jewish tradition. Margie also provides oversight for the JF&CS Alzheimer's-related disorders family support program and spiritual support for JFCS Charlotte and Richard Okanow Parkinson's family support program. Margie.
Donna, are you still there? Does anyone hear Donna or is it just me?
Oh, she's frozen.
I can hear.
Okay, I think Donna might have lost connection. It looked like she had some spotty connection.
Yeah.
Oh, are you back? Okay.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Margie earned degrees in sociology and social work from Boston University and Tel Aviv University, respectively. A graduate degree in counseling from Northeastern University and holds a certificate of thanatology from the National Center for Deaf. Is everyone frozen?
We can't see you.
No, we're not
I
frozen.
can see you.
I can see you.
Oh, there
Okay.
you are.
Okay. Okay, great. And very importantly to me, Margie is a close friend and colleague whose work I admire. I feel honored that she is with us today to discuss Jewish wisdom for self-care in the midst of a pandemic, and that she will join us again in January to discuss Jewish wisdom for growing older in the midst of a pandemic. Watch your email for more information. She might look familiar to some of you because she has not been a stranger to Young Israel. She has quite a few times in the past generously given her time and expertise to our community. And for that, we are grateful to her and the other JFCS professionals. Finally, I want to thank our wonderful Shul secretary, Carol Schauer, for all of her technical help. Help today and always. So as we begin, I give the floor to Rabbi Hellman for some initial words of Torah.
Thank you very much, Donna. Everyone can hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So I first just want to begin by by thanking the whole NaTaN team. You just heard a little bit about all the amazing things they've been doing over the last number of months, and we're really lucky, like Donna mentioned, that it sort of came to be right before the pandemic. And I just want to thank everyone in particular who helped put together this talk and this whole series. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think Donna and Barbara in particular helped put this together. And thank you to them. And thank you also, as Donna mentioned, to Margie and all the others from GFNCS who have offered their time and their expertise with us. And we really do appreciate it. So I guess I'm supposed to, begin with a little bit of a Torah perspective or add some Torah to this. But the truth is, I don't know if everyone has already opened up the source sheets that Margie's going to be sharing with us, but she really already, I found it fascinating, gathered really some wonderful Torah sources, Jewish sources about what we'll be discussing. But I guess I'll just add something small. If we'll be going through them, the first source is a medrash, which is based on a pasuk, a verse in Mishlei and Proverbs, and I'll just share that pasuk, which is not on the source sheet. It comes from Mishlei Perek Yud Aleph, Proverbs chapter 11, and the pasuk says as follows. I'll read it in Hebrew and translate. Gomel nafsho ish chesed. Someone who provides for his soul is a person of kindness. V'ocher she'iro achzari. But someone who troubles his flesh is cruel. So what does this mean? If you provide for your soul, you are a person of kindness. Normally, we would think if you're providing for yourself, it's selfish. What is it? How is that the ish chesed? The ish chesed, the person of kindness, is one who provides for others. So indeed, Rashi understands this verse to mean Gomel nafsho, someone who provides for his soul, meaning his family, his kin. If you provide for your kin, you are a person of kindness. Someone who troubles his flesh, meaning his own flesh and blood, his family, that is cruel. So in that reading, the verse is trying to teach the lesson, as the English phrase goes, kindness begins at home. You shouldn't think that caring for your own flesh is not included in chesed. It certainly is. But the Medrash takes the verse literally, as do other commentaries, that someone who provides for his or her own soul, who takes care of his or herself, ish chesed, that also is a form of kindness. We all need help. We all need support from others and from ourselves. V'ocher she'iro, and someone who troubles his or her own flesh is cruel. The terms self-care sound to our ears like a very modern one. And it is true that in our classical sources, it does not receive the attention that it does today. But you should not think that it is not a Jewish source, a Jewish idea. It certainly does appear in classical Jewish sources and teachings, based on this pasuk, perhaps based on the medrash that we'll maybe read together. And maybe we have come to realize how important it is more than earlier generations. Maybe it is more necessary now than in earlier generations. But either way, it certainly is a Torah idea that we have to make sure we are well. We have to take care of ourselves, not in a selfish way, but we have to think of ourselves. And as the pasuk says, Gomel nafsho, the one who cares for his soul, and Ocher she'iro, the one who cares for his flesh. There are two aspects. They're making sure that we are healthy spiritually, emotionally, and similarly our flesh, our body, in a very physical manner. So I'm very happy that we are having this discussion now, and thank you again to everyone who has made this happen. And this is something that on the one hand is certainly rooted in Jewish values and teachings, but that we will gain more from all of the knowledge that comes from what Margie will be able to bring to us professionally. And I hope this will be a very meaningful and beneficent session for all of us. So thank you, everyone. It's great to see everyone. And good morning. And I can't wait to learn and to be part of the discussion.
Thank you, Rabbi Hellman, very, very much. And now, Margie, go ahead. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you, Donna. So first of all, thank you, Rabbi Hellman, Yasher Koach. That was so beautiful. And I love that you gave the, the blessing that it's okay to think about self-care from a Jewish perspective, from a Torah perspective. Because I agree with you, it's not so easy all the time. It's not so easy in our modern culture as well. I don't love the word self-care, but I prefer wellness, fostering well-being, and I tend to use that instead. Because even in our modern culture, people say, oh, but that's so selfish, so self-centered. So then you have to go into a whole discussion about that. But that's why some of our sources here will speak to why we also need to be thinking about ourselves. And I'm very impressed that many of you are not showing your videos, because that's a form of self-care. You're not in the mood. I get it. We have those choices. And I'm delighted that you're here together and that everyone's doing for themselves what is best for them in the moment. And it's not the same for everyone. We all need different things to replenish our spirit, our body and our spirit. So first of all, I just want to thank Rabbi Hellman again. And I want to thank my friend Donna, who we've now been such close friends for so many years. We met through JF and CS. And it's been such a blessing to have you become my friend. We are kindred spirits in many ways. And I think we first began celebrating when we turned 50. And now it's 16 years later. So, and also Donna has been involved with JF and CS along with her husband, Richard, who I saw was on here. So it's such a lovely connection. And I also want to thank Barbara Goldmarks, because working with her has been delightful. And I see so many others on here, Leanne Shamash, Debbie Cram. Okay, so I'll stop there. I want to begin with saying that I'm going to bring in Jewish teachings, but I'm also going to bring in the wisdom psychological teachings, why these things matter. And I love it when I get an opportunity to talk to a Jewish community, a synagogue community, a shul community, because then I get to bring a few parts of myself, that I think about together. And that's what I hope will happen today. So I'm just going to start though and ask a question. And there is a chat box, but is there anybody who wants to share what they were hoping to get today? I'm just curious why you showed up. Oh, and Ellie Newsner, I know you as well. What you were hoping or what you were thinking you might get today, or in the chat. And you don't have to, but I'm just wondering if there's anybody who has a burning thing that brought them here today. And I see something. Debbie, thank you. A feeling of relief. Thank you for being a brave soul. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'll speak to that right away. Anybody else? And we can continue throughout the next time that we have together. So a feeling of relief. The quickest way, and in our tradition, the word for breath, nishima, is the same root for soul, nishama. So I love that, we're gonna learn about that, Gabriella, how to care for ourselves. So we'll start with the breath. And Donna sent you a text that was beautiful about one type of meditation, focusing on the breath. I know Donna's involved with that. So that's something that she shared, and that was beautiful. But I'm going to show you a very quick breathing meditation that you can do in the moment, any moment. Donna and I have talked about it. When you feel like you just need a quick relief. And what does it do? What does breathing do? And our breath, which is our nishima, or our connected to our soul, our nishama, what does it do? It calms down our nervous system. When we focus on our breath in the way that I'm going to share with you, it calms our nervous system down in the moment, immediately, because we have, in our nervous system, we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is called rest and digest, to help us calm down. The other one is the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, which we need as well to be safe. But when we want to relax and calm down and rest and digest, we tune into our breath. So you don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you don't like breathing, focusing on your breath, that's fine. You could focus on staring at something else in the room, keeping your eyes open, whatever's good for you. But I'm going to invite you now to focus on your breath. If you feel like you'd like to close your eyes, great. If you want to lower your gaze, that's also good. And we're going to take a breath in, and we're going to have the exhale be twice as long. And by having the exhale be twice as long, that helps to calm our body down immediately. So I'm going to guide you in this. So as we inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's try that again. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. We're going to inhale, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm just going to ask to tune into yourself, how your body feels, whether you feel any different now than you felt a couple of minutes ago. And the other breathing meditation that I want to share is something that's actually used by the Navy SEALs, and it's also used by first responders, which is stressful occupation. And it's called box breathing. And you inhale for 4, you hold your breath for 4, you exhale for 4, and you hold your breath for 4. So I'm going to guide you in that as well. If you'd like to join me, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, and then inhale. Okay, I'm wondering if there's anybody who feels like they just like to share what they're feeling or not feeling. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's just your experience. And so if you feel like you want to share, you could unmute yourself or put something in the chat.
Well, I'll share that this is a Sunday morning, so I thought I was relaxed. I wasn't really so tuned in, I guess, to how I was feeling, but as soon as I did that, I realized that I was a lot more kind of on edge than I realized I was, because I feel better than I did, and I didn't even notice.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's really powerful, what you just said. And for those who you don't know, Gabriella is a social worker, so I appreciate your sharing, and Donna's daughter. We don't always notice. Yeah, we don't always notice. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit, about noticing, about being in the present moment. Judaism gives us those opportunities to notice, to be present. So what I want to say about that is some of the research shows that we are, I'm not even going to give you a chance to guess, the percentage of time in our lives, in our busy lives, and hopefully this is not on Shabbos, but on the rest of our 6 days of the week, we are only in the present moment 10% of the time. 10% of the time. That's what the research shows, 10%. What are we doing the rest of the time? 50% of the time we're thinking about and worrying about the future, and 40% of the time we're ruminating about the past and what's already happened. So once we know that, though, I'm wondering, those of you who are on your screens, how many of you can relate to what I just said? Just raise your hands. Yeah. Thank you all for raising your hands, because you know why? This is what's important when we talk about these things, is we know that we're not alone. that we know, oh, it's not just Ellie News and her thank you for the thumbs up. I love that. Because we often think it's just us. Oh, it's just me. And we're really hard on ourselves and we beat ourselves up and all of that stuff. No, no, no. That's why it's important to have these conversations in a community, especially, I mean, how powerful. Jewish community, that's what we're meant to do, to be together in community and share and know, wow, Gabriella feels the same way. Well, you know, I feel so much better. I'm going to talk more about that later. But what I want to talk about now is, before I go on to some of the Jewish texts, just to keep talking about the present moment, is that we have what's called the negativity bias as human beings. Does anybody know has anyone heard of that other than Donna? Okay, so this I really want you to know because this kind of frames a lot of what I'm going to say. The negativity bias is what our brains automatically do. This is why we need to focus on taking care of ourselves, because our brains are wired to keep us safe. Our brains are wired, and back in prehistoric times, to keep us safe from being eaten up by saber-toothed tigers or whoever, I don't know, dinosaurs. So what that means is that our brains default automatically to the negative. So it's not our fault. It's not our fault. That's what brains do. They default to the negative when we're not focusing on something, when we're not working on something. We start to ruminate. We start to think negatively. This is what our brains do. It's called Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. Velcro for the bad. The negative gets stuck in our brains, rumination, focusing on the negative. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with everybody else? What's wrong with the world? And Teflon for the good. So the good things that happen in our life, the wonderful things that happen in our lives don't tend to stick as well. This is how our brains work. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I learn enough about this stuff to be able to teach it to others. But we can override that. And Judaism knows that so wonderfully. Why? It says we should say 100 blessings every day, right? When we're saying a blessing, we are focusing, we are in the moment, hopefully, and it's intentional, and we're blessing our food. You know, we're offering other blessings that we're noticing, and we're grateful. Wow, I have food here in front of me. So that notion, and in Donna's handout on breathing, she talked about gratitude. We know the importance of gratitude in the research, but we have it every morning. Every morning, the rabbis knew. We wake up and we say, Moda'ani, thank you, Hashem, for giving me back my soul. So that's a really powerful, whether we daven every day, whether we daven 3 times a day, whatever it is, we can, when we open our eyes, before we get out of bed, say, thank you for giving me back my soul. You know, the rabbis teach that sleeping is 1/60th of death. And so we say the Shema before we go to sleep because we don't know what's going to happen, because we know that life is uncertain, because we know that COVID-19 exacerbates our sense of uncertainty. But our rabbis knew that. So they gave us this ritual to help us stay grounded and centered. And I find that really, really powerful. And I learned that about sort of that way that we go to sleep and we say the Shema and then we wake up and we say Moda. I mean, many years ago, for many of my rabbinic colleagues in the Jewish healing movement, that's been my focus, is learning about Jewish tradition and what it has to offer us, to ground us, to help us through the vicissitudes of life. And so that's a simple practice. I'm just going to take a breath and see if anyone has any comments or thoughts. I'm taking a breath and I'm exhaling twice as long. Any thoughts or comments? You can also put something in the chat. Any questions or things that, all right. All right, I'm gonna go to, so Rabbi Hellman talked about Hillel. I'll read it out loud just because it's one of my favorites about Hillel the elder. It was the first story the first teaching in the handout, who when he took leave of his students used to walk with them a little way. His students asked him, Rabbi, where are you walking to? He answered, to do a mitzvah. This is Rabbi Hillel. He's going to do a mitzvah. And his students said, what mitzvah? And he replied, to take a bath in the bathhouse. They said to him, is that really a mitzvah? And he replied, certainly. If the statues erected to kings in the theaters and circuses are washed and scrubbed by those in charge of them, how much more should I, who have been created in God's image and likeness, wash and scrub my body as it is written, in the image of God, he made man. So I find that teaching really powerful. One of my self-care methods is taking a bath with Epsom salts. Inexpensive. My acupuncturist and my chiropractor recommended it. Gets rid of toxins. Got to put cream on your body. You don't want to get too dry in the winter. But like, I love that, that Hillel talks about taking a bath as a mitzvah. And I also want to bring your attention to the other prayer, to the prayer on the third page, the Asher Yatzar prayer, a blessing of gratitude for the workings of the body. That's exactly, for me, what that prayer connects to. That we say it after we've gone to the bathroom, we say it, I find that we don't take it for granted that the body is working, that our body is working, and everything is working appropriately. I mean, that to me is really powerful. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any thoughts about the Asher Yatzar blessing. Or Rabbi, if you have anything to add about that powerful blessing connected to the teachings of Rabbi Hillel.
And I'll just add it is interesting, right? I mean, you see what the rabbis were sensitive to, that, you would think after someone comes out of a bathroom, that's like when they're going to institute a blessing. Like, it doesn't seem like the most, appropriate time for a prayer or a blessing, but you see how aware they were and how they didn't want us to take it for granted, and how they did see it as something miraculous. Just the workings of the body, and it's not something to take for granted, but it's something very interesting to think about. There's a lot there.
I think we only really appreciate it or think about it when it's not working, and when we're having trouble going to the bathroom. So all the more important is it for us to appreciate it when it is working, which might help it to stay working.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rabbi Hellman, and thank you, Donna. So I'm going to follow up. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to follow up with what Donna said. Many years ago, when I founded the Center for Jewish Healing, I brought Rabbi Meir Sender of Young Israel in Sharon to do some teachings on Jewish healing. That was one of his interests, actually. And I know some of you know him, and he's living in Sfat now, and he's founded a contemplative prayer and meditation program called Tal Orot. But that's exactly what he said, Donna. He's very interested in the combination of psychology, anthropology with Jewish wisdom. And he asked us, I will never forget it. We all sat around and goes, what does it feel like when you're healthy? And he said what you said, Donna. He said, it doesn't feel like anything because you're healthy. It doesn't feel like anything, and therefore we can take it for granted. And so I love that, the connection with not taking it for granted and being aware that, wow, how miraculous, as the rabbi said, that our body is working. Thank you both. The next one is 3 things. I love this. From the Babylonian Talmud Brachot, 3 things restore a person's good spirits. Beautiful sounds, sights, and smells. So I want to bring that. I don't know if anyone has any comments about that. If you're familiar with that teaching or you have any way that you connect to it, I'll just wait and see if there's anybody. Yeah, Leanne. Hi, Leanne.
Hi, Margie. I wanted to tell you that for the past number of months since the pandemic began, that I've been dancing a lot, and we do a therapeutic dance class every week. When you mention sounds, it's what makes me realize how powerful music can be and how powerful the act of dance can be in and not just calming you, but also energizing you in a really positive way. So I wanted to share that with everybody. It's been amazing to have a group of women to dance with every week, and listening and feeling good, and starting our day feeling good. Anyway, that's it.
I just want to say,
Leanne, that's awesome. And I've heard from others who participated how wonderful that is. I get to do dancing, Parkinson's dance at GF&CS, and music, and a lot of music with a lot of the folks with people with Alzheimer's, et cetera. So I agree with you. I have a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to quote Leonard. Leonard, thank you so much for putting in the chat that there's a Jewish saying, which I love. It must be like Yiddish or something, you know, a healthy person has many wishes. Love that. A sick person has only one. I mean, that's so compelling. Thank you. And Leanne, thank you. I'm gonna go to what you're saying, Leanne, because that was sort of the direction that I was going towards. When I brought in that 3 things: a person's good spirits, his beautiful sound, sights, and smells. And I think that's also the power of, one of the powers of Havdalah is the smells of the samim. I mean, you know, I just think that's so powerful, because we know that that's one of our most powerful senses, is sense of smell. So I'm going to bring in a teaching that I think is also hopefully will help you going forward. It is from Dr. Irit Felsen. She's an Israeli psychologist. She lives in America. You know, Israel's really got a lot of great research on how to help people during times of crisis. And I'm going to share something that she offered. Her research is mostly with Holocaust survivors, 2nd generation and 3rd generation, but then she extrapolates her teachings to collective traumas, such as Rwandan genocide, Armenian genocide, those kinds of things. And she's an amazing, if you're interested in any of this, she's amazing. You can
Be a
find
good boy. You be a good boy.
Oh, it's Marjorie Nesson. Hi, Margie. Yes, so that's Irit Felsen. Okay. Oh, what I want to say, I knew I wanted to say something. What we're in now with COVID-19 is a shattering of what's called our assumptive world. So Donna mentioned that I got a certificate in thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. Because that's sort of been my interest and so in the grief world, when we experience a profound loss in the grief world, it's called the shattering of our assumptive world. Not for everybody, by the way, not everything, obviously, but that's one of the ways when we experience some kind of a traumatic loss, death. In the trauma world, that's also the terminology, a shattering of our assumptive world, of what we thought, what we expected, the sense of expectation going forward. And so Dr. Irit Felsen, the Israeli psychologist who is an expert in this field, said that COVID-19 is a collective worldwide trauma. And I think we don't always use that word, but I think when we can name it, there's this expression, if you name it, you can tame it. Wow, we are going through a collective worldwide trauma, are the assumptions of how we thought the world worked. So we have to look for what are the things that help us stay grounded in our lives. What are the ways that we can help to self-regulate, as it's called, our nervous systems. And one of the most powerful, we know, is what we're doing now. Being in community, social support, being there for each other, supporting each other, knowing we're not alone. So I could go on about that, but I'm preaching to the choir. So I will say that Irit Felsen has, it's called resourcing. It's used in the world of trauma, but it's used for all of us. Resources, ways that we can resource. That's what it's called, resourcing. And I'm going to read her words, and I'm going to invite you to think about this, and it's riffing off of what Leanne just said about dancing. Something that gives us joy. So in order to sort of like install a resource in our body right now, to think about a way that we can bring something positive to our body, which by the way, is how we override the negativity bias. That's how we override our brain going to the negative. We focus on the resources that bring us positive feelings. I'm going to do a quick exercise right now. Think of something in your life, something that just gives you really great pleasure, not controversial. Think of something. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Think of something. Okay, so you've got something in your mind that gives you pleasure. And now I'm going to have you take 12 seconds. That's what it takes, at least 12 seconds to override the negativity bias. So I'm going to count 12. Think about the thing you're thinking on for 12 seconds. All right, I'm wondering how many people felt like 12 seconds was a long time. Leah didn't. So, some people think, look, 12 seconds to be in silence, it can be a long time, Debbie. But it's not a long time. But that's all we need is 12 seconds minimum of thinking of something positive to override the negative. And that helps change our neural circuits, our neurochemistry, our increases neuroplasticity in the brain. I mean, this is all research. I didn't do the research. I'm sharing it with you. That we can really challenge the way that our brains default by focusing on the good. And we've started thinking about Judaism and the ways that we do that with 100 blessings. Okay, so think about something that makes you feel really good. If you want to close your eyes, you can. And what you're thinking about can be something about yourself. It can be a moment in time or a quality about yourself that you feel that you're at your best when you have this quality. It can be something about yourself. Or you could be thinking about somebody that's been very helpful to you in your life. And what about that person was most helpful? Or it can be a place that when you think about it, brings you joy and happiness. For me, that's my grandmother's house. And when you think about a place like the ocean, focus on that. Focus on, let's say if you're at the beach, focusing on the waves. So if you've got some image, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What are the smells around me? Or the sounds? Or the noises? And so for me, it's my grandmother's house and the smell of the tomatoes. The more neural circuits we evoke by thinking about this image or place, the sights and the smells, the more powerful the resource becomes in our mind. And you can use this resource in your life when you don't feel good, when you need to give yourself a boost. Just go into that safe place, that good memory. The more you think about it, with more details, the better. And one of the easy things that we can do that we're using now with children during this time of COVID and before is what's called bilateral stimulation or the butterfly hug. And you can just tap on your body if you feel like it, even though, as Aretha Felsen says, can look ridiculous. This helps calm our bodies down. Just left, right, left, right. This is something we often do even with davening. We go from, I do it from my left foot to my right foot, left foot, right foot. This helps both sides of our brains to calm down. So evoking this place that you just went to, plus tapping with bilateral stimulation helps us right in the moment. And the more we do this, the stronger it gets. So I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any comments or questions. Okay. All right, so we have 15 more minutes. I gave you a lot of my good stuff, a lot of ways to calm down really quickly. I'll tell you the research, humming, and even better if you have a prayer that you love and you hum it. So you're doing two things with one, you're praying and you're humming. That's like my favorite because I love to sing and hum. And so that also calms down our nervous system. Okay, so self-compassion. I have to say this because the rabbi talked about, the Judaism. Well, the research shows that if we don't have self-compassion, then forget about it. And that's about being hard on ourselves. The research shows, and I put it in my handout, Kristen Neff, her TED Talk, so important. How many of you have heard of Brene Brown? Brene Brown, all of her research is based on Kristen Neff's research on self-kindness. The easiest thing is the TED Talk by Kristen Neff. Why self-kindness is much more important than self-esteem. Why is that? Because we use self-compassion when we feel bad, when we're feeling badly. May I be kind to myself? And so in Judaism, we know it. Love your neighbor as yourself. You have to start with yourself. Or Rabbi Hillel, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And of course, when I'm only for myself, what am I? So, there's so much on here. What do I want to focus on now as we're getting closer? I want to end with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I'm going to end with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And I'm going to stop and ask if there's anything that anybody particularly wants me to focus on or any of the teachings in the handout. All right.
You have a comment in the chat.
Oh, Linda, I'm so glad you asked. There's so much research on this and it's so powerful. They're doing it with kids now. So the butterfly hug it's all based on EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a form of therapy used when people have had a traumatic event. It could be an accident, a car accident. It could be something which they've now proven helps us to recalibrate our brain, which is amazing. It doesn't work for everyone. And so this resourcing, which I just did, is used with EMDR for trauma therapy, but you can use it without. I think that's the point, is that we can use this resourcing, which helps us without having to go through, God forbid, a trauma. And so the butterfly hug is one way, and that particular one, that was created, which I love, 20 years ago by Lucina Artigas during her work with the survivors of Hurricane Pauline in Acapulco, Mexico. But again, it was based on the notion of bilateral stimulation, of going like that. And I don't know about you, but literally when I dive in, I'm going from left to right foot. And I thought and I never knew that was a way to calm my body, just naturally. Children do it. So anyway, so that was that about the butterfly hug. And also you can look up bilateral stimulation, permission, I think of the infection. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Susie. Of course, put on your mask first before helping the person next to you. Thank you so much about starting with ourselves. Leanne, I swear all the time when I sit and find it so calming. Well, that's an awesome connection. I do too. I also want to, so anybody else have any comments? Because I want to read two things from the teaching here. Let's see. So self-kindness, very important. Thank you for that, Leah, about gratitude. Yes, gratitude days. But again, I encourage you to watch the TED Talk, which is in the handout by Kristen Neff, about why being kind to ourselves is not being selfish. And I would also say that one of my favorite teachings is give me your hand, about the rabbi who fell ill. It's in your handout. And another rabbi came to him and he said, are your sufferings welcome to you? And he said, no, neither they nor their reward. He gave him his hand and he raised him, which meant he healed him. And then when that rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, fell ill, a third rabbi came in and said to him, you know, he was ill, Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan was a great healer. That's the point of this, one of the points of the story, is Rabbi Yochanan in the day was a great healer who would go to help others, like so many of us who are there to do mitzvahs, who are there to help others, who are there to emulate God, like in the teaching from Talmud Bavli that's in my handout as well. Just as God visited Abraham when he was sick, we too visit the sick. So we understand that we are there to help others, to do mitzvahs. But in this teaching, Rabbi Yochanan falls sick, the healer, the one who was always given. And a third rabbi comes in and says, you know, are your sufferings welcome to you? No, neither they nor their reward. Give me your hand. And he healed them. And so the rabbis asked, why did Rabbi Yochanan, the great healer, need Rabbi Hanina's help if he was able to heal his students? Why did he need help? And the rabbis replied, a prisoner cannot generally, I love the word generally in the English, free himself from prison. A prisoner cannot generally free himself from prison, but depends on others to release him from shackles. So that's what I would also say about self-care, is we need others, that we need to be able to reach out to others when we need help, that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign that Judaism knows so well that we are interdependent. We are not a community that's focused on, we're all independent like the Protestant ethic in America. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. No, we are interdependent. We can't say Kaddish without a minyan. We're not meant to be alone when we're grieving a loss. I mean, the rabbis in their psychological wisdom, they knew for parents for 11 months. I mean, that's just amazing that they understood that we need the support of the community and forevermore through saying Kaddish at the yurt sites. I just find that, because that goes to continuing bonds, which is in the grief literature. How about how we remain connected to those that we love in spirit, that we're no longer physically here. So I threw out my continuing bonds. If you're interested in that, you can Google it. Any comments before I go on about how we need each other? And I also want to say one other thing about psychological research. When we're under stress, you know, you all have heard, I'm sure, about fight, flight, or freeze. But there's another stress response that was created or researched by Shelley Taylor 20 years ago, called Tend and Befriend, and how we actually reach out to each other and we support each other when we're stressed out. We tend, typically it's to the children, and we befriend as a social support, to be there for each other. So I have to hop off, Ellie. Bye-bye. Thank you it was great to see you. Tend and befriend is something we do in our Jewish community as well. And I want to share that before I close with the teachings of Rabbi Sachs and ask if there's any other comments or questions. All right. So it's really important. Even Rabbi Yochanan needed help, right? We live in a culture where it's, you know, it's so much easier to say that we're the helper than the one receiving help. And that is not what it is to be human. If I leave you with nothing else, that's so important to be able to know. And I know that when I'm really stressed out, I could pick up the phone and call Donna and say, you know what? I'm so stressed out now. And I know she will listen to me and not judge me and give me unconditional support. That's one of the other ways that we can help each other in life. And it goes back to the research again, tend and befriend.
And, you know, just before you go on, it's been very, very, very difficult to do that these past 10 months. You can't go out for coffee with someone. The only thing you can really do with someone is take a walk, or you can Zoom. But to be in someone's presence is so different than being in Zoom presence. So, that's one of the nice things about communities. We're not the only community that created a NaTaN program, a neighbor to neighbor kind of program. Most Jewish communities have created that over the past 10 months, if not before. And it's really been a lifeline to people.
And I will say I'm into that. I completely agree with you. And I've told you, Donna, that I've had more requests for the work that I do than I've ever had because of what you say. And I feel so blessed that I get to share these things, because these things are so important during this time where we are so physically distanced. But we do have all these ways. We have these ways that 100 years ago, our ancestors did not have in 1918. When they built the Vilnius Shul, where it is now, it was during a pandemic and a war. Our ancestors, my ancestors came from Lithuania. They were dealing with what we're dealing with, and they had just gotten off the boat, by the way. I had the ship manifest from 1912 for my grandfather. So they just gotten off the boat, and they were going to, and so I understand all that, but we have Zoom and we have phones, and by calling someone on the phone, that's really powerful. The research actually is showing a phone call because you hear a person's voice. And what's wrong with sending a card in the mail, an actual card that a person can keep? I know you're doing that as well. So being creative and having these ways, and knowing, Donna, knowing how important it is to reach out, and all the work that you've done with Leah and Barbara, and to create NaTaN is such a blessing. Anybody else? All right, so this is what I did. Yes, Leah.
I think that I wanted to thank you, by the way, so much. I think that this was incredibly useful for me personally, and many of the ideas that you spoke about definitely resonated with me. I think as I'm getting older, I'm realizing the importance of reaching out to others for help, and this idea that needing help or relying on one's friends is not necessarily a sign of weakness, but it's a sign of bringing people into your life who can support you. And people can only know the full you if they understand who you are in all aspects of your life. So I really think that what you said hit home, and it hit me like last year, actually, when I needed some assistance after getting like prescription assistance after getting accidentally stuck with a needle. And I went to a pharmacy, and at that point I was the patient, and I'm usually the one helping others. And I went to the pharmacy asking for assistance because they were like, oh yeah, what you're going to need is going to cost you like $1,000+. And I'm like, okay, so can you do anything to help me? Is there anything, like any affordability program? And the person behind the counter was like, didn't offer any help. And in fact, like they said, no, I actually have, my shift ends in 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, well, never mind, let me take care of this on my own. So then my brain switched from a patient to a caretaker for myself. And so at that very moment, I realized how it is to be on both sides as a caretaker and also as a patient. And it's something that I always tell others, that it's important to accept help, but it's also important to ask for help. And if someone is asking for help, then it's always important for us to go above and beyond. And even if we don't think that we are personally capable of doing so, always making sure to go that next step and find someone who can offer that help. And I think the most important thing that I've learned through researching this topic in a different way, there's also something, Margie, I'm sure you're familiar with this term, burnout or compassion fatigue in the medical profession. And I think, or in any type of caretaker profession, it's like also another hot term. And I think the most important thing that I learned from that is looking out for others. And just like you're sensitive of things that affect yourself, also look out for those things in others. And for us, it's just important to take the concerns of our friends and our family, not as being, something that is like to become defensive to, but instead acknowledging like, oh, someone cares for me, and to be accepting of that assistance as well. Because I think especially now people are in a position where they'd never imagined themselves needing assistance, or being in that position that they're going to rely on someone. So I think it really works both ways to give help and to be accepting of help, and to make yourself vulnerable in times that you yourself need it. So thank you very much for sharing those things. I think it really hit home for me. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Leah, for sharing everything you just shared. That was really powerful. And you said it so beautifully about why we human beings need each other, why we're social animals, and that if we're not willing to make ourselves vulnerable, then neither is anybody else. And we're taking a risk sometimes, but usually someone says, yeah, I know how you feel. I feel that way too. I've been in that place. And by the way, what you say about being a patient versus a care, well, I think those of us who had gone through something, have been in a patient, been in a vulnerable situation, can draw on that sense of what we felt like to be even better, helping others. Dr. Jerome Grootman, who wrote beautiful books, he's a physician in our area, wrote a book about his own experience being a patient and how that changed how he was as a doctor. Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to close with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha. Donna and I bond over Rabbi Sachs as well, and I have his siddur here with the teachings also from the Rav. And if you don't get what I'm saying, I want to give you the citation so you could look it up yourself. Because what I looked at, I said I wanted to really talk briefly about cognitive behavioral therapy and how that can help us right now. And so I Googled cognitive behavioral therapy and Judaism. And I came up with a bunch of things, but how profound that I came up with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs for next week's Parsha. Vayigash. And he says that Yosef is the ultimate. He's like our first psychotherapist for reframing things, for turning the negative and reframing it into a positive that was God's plan for him to go down there and save the Jewish people. So I love that. That was to skip to the end. But if you Google Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and you put in the first psychotherapist, you'll get the teaching for next week's. I don't know what year he wrote it, but it's for Yigash. And what he also had to say, which I loved, was he said that all of the therapists, all the psychotherapists, they're all Jews. Freud, Aaron Beck, Viktor Frankl, and Martin Seligman, who also, so Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, changed my life, that book when I was 20, Holocaust survivor. And Aaron Beck, I'm going to talk a bit about him as I close, and Martin Seligman is the founder of positive thinking. But this is what, I'm going to end with this. What time are we? Yep, I'm going to end now. So this is what Aaron Beck, who was the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, this is Rabbi Sachs's words. He said, Rabbi Aaron Beck found that feelings were often linked to negative thoughts. Okay, so we've been talking about the negativity bias, about themselves or about the world, the negative thoughts are about themselves or the world and the future. And by getting a person to think more realistically, he found that their mood tended to improve. Also Martin Seligman, he talked about interpreting events in a particular way, like it's permanent, it's always like this, or it's personal, it's my fault, or it's pervasive, I always get things wrong. So those are also, as opposed to ways to override that. And what links all these thinkers is the belief that there was always more than one possible interpretation of what happens to us. We can choose between different interpretations, and the way we think, this is so important, the way we think shapes the way we feel. And that's why I included the quote from Viktor Frankl, which you can read on your own, about we who lived in concentration camps, because he talks about even in the worst of circumstances, we can choose our attitude. And that's the important thing about cognitive behavioral therapy, that we can choose our attitude. We have the ability as human beings to focus on the way, to notice what we're thinking about and say, is that correct? Is that realistic? Or maybe am I, catastrophizing in some way? And so I want to end with, I mentioned to you what he said about Joseph. And he ends with, I love this, we can't all be Joseph in the Bible or Yosef, but thanks to Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi in spiritual terms, and to Viktor Frankl, Aaron Beck, and Martin Seligman, secular ones, I love that, we can learn what it is to change the way we feel by changing the way we think. And the best way of doing so is to ask, what does this bad experience or this bad feeling enable me to do that I could not have done otherwise? That's a reframing. What can this bad experience, and this isn't for every experience, but in general, what can this COVID-19, what can it enable me to think about in a different way that maybe I couldn't have done otherwise? And to end with Rabbi Sachs's words, he says, that can be life transforming. Thanks.
So sorry, we missed the whole thing. Missed it.
Marjorie, Yasher
Oh.
Koach. I want
Thank
to
you.
thank you. I want to thank you. Really, you started out the session with lowering our autonomic nervous system, and it just continued to lower it the entire time. I feel very, very peaceful. I really want to thank you for all of your insights, for pulling together so many wonderful sources to help, and then to end with Rabbi Sachs, who's always a comfort to
I wrote
think.
it down too.
Oh, well, thank you, Donna. He's a comfort to me too. And I also want to read Leah's awesome quote in Yiddish. Think good and it will be good. Tracht gut, wird sein gut. I mean, come on. Our ancestors, we can learn from them. They had a few troubles, right?
And I understand that Leanne Shamash's dance might be open to people in general. Is that something that people can sign up for?
Yeah, I just sent a text, and I'm thinking, Donna, that we could send an email from NaTaN to folks.
Excellent. Okay. So maybe you could give Leah that information, and she can send it out.
Sounds
Barbara.
great.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Brittany.
So it's really a nice way to start a Sunday, a very boring day for me. So I'm glad everyone was here. I hope everyone got something from this and will take something forward. And I want to remind everyone that if you're interested, we are having a third NaTaN meeting where we'll be talking, where Marjorie will help us talk about growing older during a pandemic. I know that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and what time means, and what this year means, not really doing the sorts of things that bring me the kind of joy that I usually do. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And that information will be going out on email.
Thank you.
Thank you.